quick break, we are going into fall-through attributes. Honestly, I don't know what it is, so let's find out. Attribute inheritance. A fall-through attribute is an attribute or beyond even listener that is passed to a component. But it's not explicitly declared in the receiving component's props or emits. I see. Common examples of this include class, style, and ID attributes. When a component renders a single root element, fall-through attributes will be automatically added to the root element's attributes. For example, given a MyButton component with the following template, just this, this whole thing is a template with one root, which is this button element, and the parent using this component with class equal large, the final rendered DOM would be button class large. And again, this is because we have a single root in this component, a single element in the top level of the component. In other words, this component has two roots because there are two components at the same level at the first level of the component, but all this styling is a waste of time. This component has one root because this is the root of the component, and these two elements are nested inside. This component has one root. It's important to keep in mind that some things are a bit different for components that have one root and for components that have multiple roots. So for components that have one root, if we give a class large to the component, then the DOM will end up being like this, adding this class large to the root element of the component. If there is only one root, class and style merging. If the child component's root element already has existing class and style attributes, it will be merged with the class and style values that are inherited from the parent. Suppose we change the template of MyButton in the previous example to this, where we have, in addition to what we had before, we have a class button. And then the final rendered DOM would now become class button and large. So the properties are merged, or the values are merged, which is very cool. V-on listener inheritance. The same rule applies to V-on even listeners. If you have a MyButton, add click on click, the click listener will be added to the root element of MyButton. It est, or that is, the native button element. When the native button is clicked, it will trigger the onClick method of the parent component, this one. If the native button already has a click listener bound to V-on, then both listeners will trigger. Okay, so the same thing that was said for class would apply for event listeners. Nested component inheritance. If a component renders another component as its root node, for example, we refactored MyButton to render a base button as its root, so that would be MyButton. It could be rendering another component, which is base button. Then the fall-through attributes received by MyButton will be automatically forwarded to base button. There's nothing strange here. This is exactly what you would expect. Note that forwarded attributes do not include any attributes that are declared as props or V-on listeners of declared events by MyButton. In other words, the declared props and listeners have been consumed by MyButton. Forwarded attributes may be accepted as props by base button if declared by it. Okay, is this clear? Let's look at an example just in case. We have our app, we have my button, and then we have a base button. The base button has a template which renders a button. Button with a click me label. That's the base button. Wait, what is happening here? What is even happening here? There you wait. Now this is the base button, and the my button. Well, it's the my button is gonna have a script setup. It's gonna import. Wait, it's gonna import base button from base button, and then it's gonna have a template with a single node, which is gonna be base button. Okay, and then the app is gonna import. Let's just type it. Import my button. Wait, my button from my from dot my button. Wait for it. Wait for it. My button. Okay, now we have my button. Let's show the console because we'll show some things on the console. Okay, let's go to my button, add a click handler, which handler script setup const handler equal console.log clicked. Now, of course, when we click this button, we'll print this base button clicked, as you can see. Now, what this thing is telling us is that we didn't, let's make it a bit nicer, we didn't declare any kind of props whatsoever. So if we, for example, do here style, let's call it button, for example, and let's make it be background color teal, and then we do give this button a class. Let's color white. We are just passing a class to this my button component, and this basically is passed down to base button, which is passed down to this button because it's the root. We can take a look at this base button. This class is not doing anything, of course, but if we take a look at if we inspect this element, we're gonna see that we have a button with class base button and with class button, and this class button comes from all the way up, from the app component. Okay. Now, let's see. The other thing that is happening is that we can pass a click listener to this, which can have a handler, and then here we can declare a handler, which is going to be equal to console.log, and here we're going to print my button was clicked. button, we're gonna clean this thing, and if we click this button, we see that the innermost event was also triggered, paste button clicked, but this event we put all the way up also triggered. And okay, now this is basically what the docs tell us about fall-through attributes. What it also tells us is that forwarded attributes do not include any attributes that are declared as props or beyond listeners declared as events. So if we here go and do define emits, I think it is, and this thing takes an array with a click, I think that now define emits is not defined. Let's see how this works. Define emits. Define emits. It's like this. Wait, what happened here? I think it kind of works. If we click it now, as you can see, only this event, this handler triggered, not this, because this now is, let's say, quote unquote, blocked by the fact that inside my button, where we add a click listener, where that triggers this handler, my button now has a defined emit, which is click. And this, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what's the right word for that, but let's say it's kind of trapped by this defined emit, and it's not falling through. It's kind of the chain all the way down for this event stops here, because here we are going through this event, this component. We're passing in a click listener, and here when we reach this component, we view sees, hey, we have an emit defined here. So, and this is not actually being triggered because there is not like, you know, we are not triggering this emit. There is not like we should add here on click, then whatever emits whatever, but it's not. So this event is not emitted by this. So this is not triggered anymore. But if we don't have this, then this is a fall through. It's not a prop or an event which is defined, so it just falls through this component because this component is the root. Then in this component, in the root, we have a click listener with a handler, which is triggered. And now because and then the trigger, the listener all the way up with this handler will fall through because we remove that define emit, and it's gonna be kind of appended to this thing. And if we do something which is maybe kind of ridiculous, but we have a class here, if we turn this class into a prop here, we'll see that these styles are no longer applied because it's for the same reason. There is a prop defined here for this component, and we are not doing anything with this prop, so it doesn't fall through anymore. Defining props and emits, it kind of captures everything passed down from the parent, and it doesn't allow it to fall through furthermore, even if it could. If we wanted to achieve the same thing with this class prop, which, I mean, this is kind of ridiculous to define a prop named class. Never do that, please. It's just an example. Never define a prop called class. That's game breaking. Don't do that, please. But if we wanted to achieve the same effect we had before, then we would explicitly have to pass the class we had as a class, and then we'll have to make this dynamic, and then we have it back. Okay, now if we're gonna take a tiny little break, and then we're gonna continue with the fall through attributes.